Hey, Scrappy Peeps, Suzanna here today for Elle Studio, and I'm sharing with you a layout created with a focus on the typewriter alphabet stamp. That was the add-ons for the April kit, and this is the layout that I created with that emphasis again on that typewriter alphabet stamp. So I am going to create a mixed media background before I get going. I know that this is a garden themed layout, and I know that the color palette that I'm going to go with is yellow, aqua, and gray. So I know I want to use these watering cans for this gardening themed layout, and so I want a bit of a background to provide some contrast between that white and the gray to really make those watering cans pop. So I just have a little bit of yellow shimmers there and some water, so I'm kind of doing some watercolor, and I've watered down that shimmers. And then I want to have water falling from the watering cans, and so you see that stencil on the right from Prima. I originally thought that I was going to do that, but I really liked more of that falling from the watering can look than just the straight down rain effect. And so I decided that this was the perfect way of getting that accomplished. And then I'm just going to dip my brush in and put a couple of splatters again, just to kind of take away some of that cleanness of the layout and give it more of that earthy feel that the gardening has. So I actually have two sets of pictures here. I have one of us actually at Lowe's shopping for the garden stuff, and then I have one of Mia actually gardening, and you can see that's what I decided to go with there. It is a photo collage. Basically all I did was drop 4 photos into a Photoshop template, and that gave me that one 4x6 photo there. So these are a mix of cards from the kit as well as the Plant Lady journaling tags. You know I like to use those as layers, and I will cut them out. And I just like the way that that pulls everything together, and it gives me a spot for journaling, although I very rarely journal on the journal cards. Those were dies that I had from the Beautiful Day die cut set, and again, as usual, I will link you to everything that I've used down below. It's an affiliate link, so if you go shopping, I will, yes, get a percentage, but it's a very small percentage, so if you forget the link, don't worry about it. So that's the top of the card that, again, from the Plant Lady journaling tags that I just cut out to create another die cut that works well with the layout. So what I've done is I've put a few of the stamps on there just to gauge for spacing. I know that this is a very long quote, and I know that it's going to take up the bulk of the left-hand side of the page there, but I want to make sure that I can get the words in width-wise without having to do too much manipulating there. So I'm just using that as a guide for where things are going to go. I also am going to try not to adhere too much of that stuff down, because if it is down, it is harder to make shifts around working things out, whereas if it's not adhered, I can just kind of shift it over. So what I have found is that when you're stamping with this stamp, maybe it's with the inks, that using a whole word, so if I were to have done all of when, the ink ends up being spotty and it stamps sort of spotty. So in order to get a cleaner, crisper stamp, I recommend that you stamp with only 1 to 2 letters at the same time. And how this works out perfectly is I actually am using 2 shades of gray here. I am using my Pink Fresh Studio inks, and I have the lightest gray, I believe it is, and then a slightly darker gray. And what this lets me do is it allows me to kind of give that typewriter effect by having the different weights. So when you use a manual typewriter, you don't get that consistent color throughout with typing, right? It depends on how hard you strike the key. And so by altering these inks, I'm giving more of that effect of the typewriter. I also, because this is a lot of the the photos and the elements are on the page are on different angles. It is not a quote-unquote clean and layout, and so I am also varying the angles of the letters to give, again, more of that kind of typewriter effect, as well as just to go with that sort of more earthy, organic feel of the layout as well. So from here, I am going to speed this up because it literally is the same process from beginning to end, where I just kind of randomly alternate the light gray and the darker gray and stamp out the quote. So a little bit about the quote. The quote says, "When the world wearies and society fails to satisfy, there's always the garden." So this is a COVID-19 themed layout. We are still under quarantine or stay at home. We're not actually quarantined because we're sick. We're under stay at home orders. And one of our quote unquote normal activities is to go to the garden shop, and Mia does these big planters that are out front in our house. There's two, one on either side, that greet you when you come to our house. And so we couldn't go to our normal garden shop, so we went to Lowe's instead and had a nice little outing. Actually, it was kind of funny because it was her first outing out of the house in a very long time. So there was a lot of silliness involved, but we did our part. We wore our masks and our gloves, and so these are the goodies that we brought home, and we puttered around in the garden. And while we weren't really gardening, we were still playing with plants, and there was just something therapeutic about this. So this long quote ends up being the title and / subtitle for the layout, and in as many ways just as much a part of the storytelling as the photos are and the journaling, because it gives you a taste of what it is that the topic of the layout is about. So there I have finished the bulk of the quote, and then I want to use garden as a little bit heavier, a different font. And so I am going to go with the large Jane outline stamp, and then I'm also going to use the accompanying dies to cut those out. But before I do that, I am going to go ahead and now stick everything down. I'm going to pop these watering cans up off of the page with a little bit of foam adhesive. I like the rolls of foam adhesive because usually I am using larger elements and I don't want the squares to fall, the elements that I'm adhering to the page to fall between the squares. So I am just using the part of the card that you are going to see there because I feel like I can get more use out of the card that way and fussy cut the flower. And then I'm going to use one of those die cuts from the, as I said before, Beautiful Day die cuts, and I'm going to scatter those around the page, trying to create the visual triangle with those flowers. So you kind of have one unit of the flowers in the card on the top right of the photo, then you're going to come to the yellow journaling card to the left of the photo collage, and then another one right there to the right of that happiness found right here. I just pointed out where I'm going to put the journaling because you can see I've covered up garden. Originally, I had intended for that yellow card to be where the journaling would go, but you can see garden wasn't going to fit there, and I really wanted to use that bigger word garden there. I needed that shot of aqua or teal. I am so bad at distinguishing between the two. It needed that shot of that color there in order to provide some balance between the aqua in that 4x3 card with the flowers in it there at the top right. And so that's why I went with the aqua there. And then with that bigger, bolder color. I could have changed the font as well, but it wouldn't have given you that same effect. And in many ways, there's sort of a diagonal, and it's a low diagonal down across the bottom of the page there. So I keep my dies in this little, I think this is just from the dollar store. I got 3 of these cubes for $1 a long time ago. It's the perfect place for them. They all fit in there, and it just sits with all my other goodies. I could have mounted them on some magnetic sheets, but I really like them just in that little cube there. So I'm going to run the letters through first. Normally I would stamp it and then I would run them through, but I don't know why I didn't do that. I think it was more from a spacing perspective that I wasn't sure that I was actually going to stamp. So I had put the stamps out so that you could actually see more of what it looked like. And now that I've run them through and have just the letters, they definitely need that light outline there in order to give you the balance and that weight. It would have been fine as it is, but really it does look best with the outline stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and just I think I'm just going to use the darker of those two inks that I have there, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp the outline of each letter. Because I've done the reverse process of what I would normally do, the stamps are already cut out. They shift, and so I needed the purple tape in order to kind of anchor that down to make sure that as I was pressing the stamp down, they weren't going to shift. And so that's why you see that purple tape from ThermoWeb there that I'm using. I do get a little bit of shift and it's not perfect stamping, but it goes with the rest of the randomness of the stamping in the other letters using that typewriter stamp there in order to create kind of that, like I said before, organic feel that we have. So I've sped this up. I'm sorry if I'm making you seasick, but again, I have two options. I can either cut it out and you can just assume that you know what's happening, or I can make it go super fast, which is what I've chosen to do on this particular video here, just to show you, so you still see that whole layout come together. It's just not a tediously long layout. So I have here the wood veneers, and they look fine on the layout, but it's introducing another color, which I don't really want to do. I really like the color palette as it is, and sometimes I feel like you add things like that spring there looks good. I like it actually down above when I had it above the photo collage. But sometimes I feel like I'm using things just because I have things and not because they really serve a purpose on my layout, which is why you will see me decide as I was trying to showcase them that no, I don't indeed need to use those and put them away. So here I have the Springtime Tabs stamp, and this goes with the die that came out, I want to say at the end of last year, and I can't remember the name of that die set, but it matches perfectly, and it has a lot of spring sayings. So I am going to put Bloom and Grow. I've put Bloom and Grow below the garden, and I've repeatedly stamped it so that it fades. And then that there says springtime, so they're just all relevant, and they're kind of subtle texture to the page, and not really important things for you to read. It's just kind of that little detail that catches your eye. And then that one there says in the garden. I am going to journal below that one that says in the garden in that little space there. And I just talked about the process about our gardening. I love this little shot of yellow that I'm going to add here. I am going to off camera take a little bit of yellow. I keep all of my Elle Studio scraps together, and I have found this stripe. It's yellow with a thin white stripe in it that I'm going to put across the top of the photos there. And again, it's just that little shot of yellow that kind of pulls everything together. So those are this month's puffy stickers, the lovely puffy stickers, and I'm actually going to move them. The one that is above the watering can, I'm going to put on the watering can, and that wraps it up, my friends. So enjoy the close-ups. Thanks for stopping in today. Again, if you wanted to see the product list, everything's in the description box down below. I hope you're surviving your quarantine well. Take care. Thanks for stopping in today.